I'm Richard Gearhart, an intellectual property attorney specializing in patents, trademarks, and copyrights.
And I'm Elizabeth Gearhart, not an attorney, but I do work at Gearhart Law doing marketing, and I'm an entrepreneur.
Welcome to Passage to Profit, everybody, the road to entrepreneurship, where we talk with inventors, innovators, and small businesses about their intellectual property and how it helps them flourish. And on tonight's show, we are very pleased to have Thom Stimpel, who is from Proactive Forums and Flawless Launch. So he's going to be sharing information on how you can flawlessly launch your company.
Yes, he's an architect of possibilities. And after Thom, we're going to be hearing from Shereese Floyd. I love what she has. Listeners, do you ever feel invisible? I know I do sometimes. Well, Shereese can help you fix that. And then we have Dave Combs. And if you have not heard Dave Combs' music, you are missing out on one of the joys of life. So very interested to hear how he's built that business.
Yeah, absolutely amazing. But before we get to our distinguished guests, it's time for IP in the news. So what's going on with that?
I need a cup of coffee.
I didn't think I thought you drank tea. You're a tea drinker, not a coffee drinker. I'm a coffee drinker.
Yeah, this is a patent that IBM had issued in 2018. We've yet to see it, but it's called drone delivery of coffee based on a cognitive state of an individual.
So cognitive state, those are pretty fancy words. If you look at the patent, though, it shows a cognitive state of somebody falling asleep. So I guess what you would do is use the drone to deliver the coffee to somebody who really, really needs it.
Right. Or you can raise your hand when the drone's flying by. Kind of like, remember at the football games and the baseball games, the peanut guys.
Yeah, I just wonder when that's going to happen. When are the peanut sellers at ball games going to get replaced by drones? So it'd be kind of a sad thing.
That would be horrible. But anyway, this hasn't happened yet. So thing that kind of gets me is that that they gestured they would like the drinker for whom an electronic analysis of sensor data indicates to be in a predetermined cognitive state. Like, what are they going to do?
I don't know. If it were me, they just need an audio sensor and they could hear my snoring. But personally, as much as I respect IBM, I could see where a lot of employees would need that working at that company.
Yes, we won't do any engineer jokes this show. Okay.
Anyway, so it's time for Richard's Roundtable, and who is going to be our first target? I guess Thom. Thom, tell us, what do you think about the flying coffee machine? And also, if you have any questions about intellectual property, please send them over, and we'll do our best to address them.
Well, the flying coffee thing, it just cracks me up, honestly. I think it's an excuse to try and figure out how to use a drone. It's like years ago, I was involved in a company that was building lasers when lasers just weren't used anywhere. They were a solution looking for a problem. I think that's what this drone thing is too. A solution looking for a problem. And cognitive state just cracks me up. It's like my cognitive state's likely to be all over the map at any time of the day. And I'm afraid there'd be a drone over my house about 30 hours a week.
Well, if you're a hacker, why don't you could conceivably just cause the drone to dump coffee on your least favorite coworker too. So I think there's a lot of angles to this that need to be addressed.
Yeah, I think people would buy into that even more.
So Shereese, what's on your mind?
Well, it all sounds a little crazy to me. Crazy, maybe not the right word. I am not a coffee drinker, so I am always amazed by how coffee infiltrates our world, and this is a lot.
Yeah.
Good point.
I think she makes a good point there. It's going to extremes. I guess what else could you have these drones bring you, like the remote, for example, or you could fly it to Wendy's and get a cheeseburger.
You know what I want? You know my drone idea, right? So our lawn is really wet a lot of the time. So I want a drone that cuts the lawn but flies above it so you don't get any tire tracks in the lawn. But someday maybe.
I think they already have those, by the way. They do have
They've heard me talking about it.
You didn't file a patent when you had a chance.
like I would have time to do that project. Please. I just want it.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah.
Dave, what about you? What are your thoughts?
Well, my music is sometimes used to put people to sleep. So I'm not sure how my music would fit in with this coffee drone thing. But anyway, it sounds a little bit like I agree with Thom that it's a solution looking for a problem here. But anyway,
do you drink coffee when you're composing music?
No, I'm not really a coffee drinker. I like tea. I do like, but I'm from the South. I like sweet tea.
Okay.
Oh, there you go.
But doesn't sweet tea just sort of provide a jolt of some sort?
Oh, it does. It may have more caffeine. It may have more caffeine than coffee. I don't know, but it'll keep you awake.
So I can imagine listening to Dave's music and just all of a sudden it's speeding up in the middle of it, and that's where he was composing with iced tea.
Or you're listening to Dave's music and you're trying to fall asleep in the drone flight.
Waking you up.
What about Kenya?
I don't know. What about Kenya?
Kenya?
Kenya, what are your thoughts?
I agree with Thom. I think that, and a little bit of the conspiracy theorist in me thinks it's a way to measure employee productivity. So in terms of like delivering a cup of coffee, are they really finding about other things that are going on, like on the floor with employees? So I don't know. It's just,
that's
I don't know.
That's
a clever way to figure out things.
A spy drone disguise.
I guess so. It's like, what does it mean when they start tallying the number of cups of coffee that an employee drinks? Is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? So
may show up on your performance appraisal.
Right.
You put it on your permanent record.
Along with pictures of whatever was on your desk at the moment.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it flies over, takes a picture of your computer screen. We know what they're up to for sure.
Yeah.
So anyway, well, that was really a fun debate, and now it's time for our distinguished guest, Thom Stimpel, from Proactive Forums and Flawless Launch. Welcome to the show, Thom.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
And we're so glad to have you. So what are Proactive Forums and what is Flawless Launch?
Well, they both have their base in my original company, which is called Proactive Business Improvements. It was founded in 2002 after the corporate world melted down, in my life anyway, after 9/11. And I started that business to be a business advisor, to work with companies to help them solve complex problems and capitalize on opportunities and those kinds of things. I did a lot of business process re-engineering and trying to help people find new competitive advantages. And over the years, it became obvious to me that I needed to be working with small businesses, not large businesses like I originally thought.
So why was that? I mean, what was the decision point there that made you rethink your business strategy?
Honestly, it was a gentleman I met who used to be the president of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. I went to a luncheon one time where he made a presentation, and the numbers that he presented were shocking, and they hold true today as well. This presentation was back in 2007 or 8, I think, I forget exactly. But Thom made this presentation. He indicated that approximately 90% of the GDP is produced by companies with fewer than 50 employees every year. And that was amazing. Shocking to me. Yeah. But even more shocking was the fact that almost 80% was produced by companies with fewer than 5 employees. Wow. And yet, of all the new businesses that are begun every year, on average, about 54% of them fail within 2 years and 97% fail within 5. And being close to what a failure looks like, because in my work, I had done a lot of work with companies that did quite well. We had some good successes, but I'd seen a lot of people bail out on projects that would have made them successful, and they failed and they wasted a lot of money, and there was a lot of problems associated with that, even domestic problems included. And so it occurred to me that I've just got to focus on small businesses. That's I want to cure the epidemic of small business failures in this country. That's really kind of my mission in life right now. And I can't do it all by myself, but by having opportunities to make presentations and like this, and to be on podcasts. And I do my own podcast as well, as Elizabeth knows. In fact, you're a guest next Monday, so get ready.
I'll be there.
There's a lot of business advisors like myself around the country, many of whom I know very well, who are concerned about this as well. And the thing that's interesting is we used to have kind of a roundtable forum among about 50 of us that would get together every month and discuss our clients and our issues, and where are we having trouble, and where could we use some specialized expertise that somebody else may have. And we were always frustrated by the businesses that would do half measures. They would bring you in and get a flavor for what it is that they needed to do, and then they wouldn't allow you to stick around and help them actually implement things and do things successfully. And
So
that's why 97% of businesses fail, because they just don't look for they don't know, honestly, to look for the support that they need.
And I was just going to ask you a follow-up question, and you ended on that. I mean, what are some of the causes? What are the main causes of businesses failing? If our audience, I know there's probably a lot of reasons, but a lot of people in our audience are thinking about maybe starting their own business. And so what advice
Right.
would you give to them to look for,
Mhm.
things to look for to help make themselves successful?
Well, I think the biggest problem, to answer your first question, is pride. People don't think that they need help, or they don't want to believe that they need help. They think they've got it all covered. Particularly folks who are coming out of a corporate environment where they've been there for a few years and they think they've seen it all. But to become an entrepreneur, you've got to wear so many hats, and you got to look good in all of them. And you need to be able to sort through the things that you don't do well, or you don't know enough about, and bring in some contract help to help you out. Eventually you may elect to hire those people full time. That'd be great. But in the beginning, there's a lot of bases to cover, and you can't possibly do them all. I mean, even myself, after 20 plus years in corporate and a really, really broad background, there was a lot of stuff I did not know, and I had to reach out to people to find out about the things that I needed to know. And even it's kind of funny. One of you mentioned that my sort of tagline has been
An architect of
yeah,
possibilities.
yeah. I just went blank there for a minute.
I have it written down.
Yeah. Yeah, it's on my business card and all that. And that came from Tom Peters, actually. I accidentally had an opportunity to have lunch with him one day when I was looking into what my next opportunities were going to be. And it was about the time I was starting this business. And he was asking me, the details of what I could do. I was going through the whole laundry list of things that I'd done. And in his summation, he said, well, if you can do this and this and this and this and this, then you've pretty much got all the bases covered. So you're what I call an architect of possibilities. And I was like, wow, I like that. Can I use that?
Yeah,
And
that's pretty good
Tom,
from
I
Thom
want-
Peters.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
he shook his finger at me and he said, I don't ever want to see your business card without that title on it.
Okay. I wanted to ask you, go back to something that you just mentioned in passing, but you said you should use contractors. So what's your favorite place to find contractors, and how do you pick the right one?
Honestly, I think a smart place for someone to go who is starting a small business and doesn't really know too many people, if you don't know, a lot of people, is look inside an organization called BNI, Business Networking International. It's an organization of small business owners who get together to try and help, promote each other. And that networking that they get done is not just within, the small community of 15 or 20 people that they have breakfast with every week, but with hundreds of people in the region. And so you get to know a lot of people who have specialized expertise in certain areas. So if you went to one of those meetings, you may find that you'd like to join just so that you can promote your own business and help other small businesses as well. But at a minimum, you'll probably make a good relationship with someone who can help you find the right people. There's a lot of business advisors out there, people like myself. Some of them are very good and they know exactly what they're doing. Unfortunately, most of them have a really, really narrow path in terms of, what they can do well. And I started to mention a minute ago, the 50 or so of us that would get together once a month. One of those months, one of the guys that I work with, and Elizabeth, who Tom Fleury, came up with this brilliant idea. He said, the problem is we're approaching this from the wrong angle. We're trying to take people who are already in business, who are struggling mightily in most cases, and we're trying to turn them around. And they don't have the right headset. They don't have the right mindset or framework to accept the kind of help that we know we can provide to them. We need to capture them before they get to that point. And so, long story short, we started working on a training program that would capture aspiring entrepreneurs and teach them what it was like to really be an entrepreneur, how difficult and complicated it was. And honestly, our intent was to scare the hell out of about 70% of them. So they'd go back home and go, okay, I got to update my resume and find another job because this entrepreneurial thing is not for me. And that's evidenced by the, 97% of them fail. So we had built this training, but we never actually had an opportunity to roll it out for a couple of reasons. Primarily the pandemic really kind of got in the way. Plus we had built it to be a face-to-face, real intense weekend thing, which ultimately we decided wasn't the best way to do that. So this year we're actually reformulating it to be an online self-paced program that's got live support every week on Zoom calls and so on and so forth. I also wrote a book called The Entrepreneurial Mindset that actually goes through the entire methodology that we prescribe for people to understand how difficult it is to be an entrepreneur. And then if they elect to move forward, there's a methodology for steps to follow that are the smartest things to do and the most intelligent way to approach researching and developing a new business for yourself. And so I tell people all the time, if you're going to start a new business, at least just go buy the book. It's $12, if you're not,
it's a small investment.
Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to reiterate your advice about BNI. And when I was starting out, I met somebody who was good at developing websites, Bill Trelaw. He's still out there doing his thing. And he invited me to come to this BNI chapter. And it was about 20 people. We had, real estate people, insurance people. There were other types of attorneys. But having that as kind of a support system was very valuable. And I also got referrals from them since I wasn't doing real estate, but every once in a while, somebody would say, oh, somebody needs a trademark or whatever. And for myself as an attorney, people would ask me, do you know anybody who does wills? Well, there was a person in the BNI group that did wills. And so if you can help somebody else out, then, that's a great way to, be in a kind of put good karma out there and earn a good reputation about yourself. So, and I don't think that's mentioned enough. I really don't. So I applaud you, for that. Kenya, you must have a question.
Yeah. So what are some early red flags that sometimes entrepreneurs miss when a business is starting to fail?
Well, boy, that's a big question. Really kind of depends upon, the direction they're going. But quite often it's having way too much confidence in a really bad idea. Unfortunately, quite often it's not having the support of your family. That's an enormous problem, particularly if you're having to go out and raise funds, because As much as I hate to say it, banks are not your friends when you're starting a brand new business. They'll be all over you if you've got a year worth of profits behind you and you've got a really great business plan and some plans for growth in areas that are really interesting to them. But just to go into a bank and say, I'd like to start a, small engine repair shop and I need, $100,000 to do the following, blah, 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 blah. Not going to happen. You're going to have to rely on other sources. They also really horribly mess up budgeting. Most of them don't have a clue how to do a budget. And so they over forecast what they think they can accomplish in terms of revenues and severely under forecast expenses. And even after they go back and redo their expenses, I tell them to add 40% because you're definitely wrong. We're all wrong. None of us can forecast that accurately. So, a lot of it has to do with their attitude. A lot of it has to do with getting the support they need, understanding the financial scenario, but there's just tons of other things that they need to understand out front. The one thing I really harp on with people is, why are you starting a business? If you don't have a why that resonates with your clients, they're not going to buy from you, because all the decisions that people make are emotional. They're not based on logic. So even if you have great products and it's something exactly what someone needs, if they don't like your business style, or if they don't really understand why you started that kind of a business, it's not likely they're going to buy from you. There's a great book out called Start With Why by a gentleman named Simon Sinek. And I tell everybody, particularly if they're in a marketing role, you got to read this book. It's the best business book I ever read. It really puts your head straight when it comes to that all important connection to your customers. And
what was the name of the book again, Thom?
It's Start With Why.
Start with.
Yeah, by Simon Sinek, Senek.
Why?
Great guy. Yeah.
I just couldn't resist. I'm sorry. But I do think, though, that, I do think a person's attitude is, especially if you're in like a service business, of really wanting to help people. I'm very, I was very impressed with the reasons you expressed for turning towards small businesses as clients, because trying to prop up or help small businesses that are struggling is very worthwhile, because people put a lot of time and energy, and if it doesn't work out, there's disappointment. And but I always tell clients that, okay, if it doesn't work out, then you've tried it, right? And you'll figure out whether you like being an entrepreneur or you don't. And if you've never tried, then you'll probably regret it for the rest of your life. And if you're successful, then you've found something new. So even if it doesn't work out, it's still an experience, and you can take those skills, because we all learn things, and take them back into the corporate world. So it's not necessarily a lose-lose proposition. It's just it's a learning experience.
I would say that you need a coach. Like, you need someone like Thom. I guess you're kind of considered a coach. You need somebody like Thom when you're starting out, especially if you've never done this before, because even if you have done it before, you still need a coach, I think.
Oh, I've had so many coaches, and and it helps immeasurably, because part of it is you don't know what you don't know, and you need somebody to say, you don't know this, and you better learn something about it, otherwise you're going to screw up, right? And that's what an experienced coach can help with. Have you considered this, for example? And
one of the other things I like to tell people about why I focus in the small business arena is not just to help the families and keep from wasting their life savings or the kids' college education or something. But if you really look at those numbers that the Chamber of Commerce presented, and that the U.S. or Small Business Administration would agree with on an annual basis, it sort of suggests that somewhere around 3% of small businesses hold up 80% plus of the gross domestic product. So if somehow we could change that success rate from 3% to maybe even 4 or only 5%, Could you imagine what an amazing boost in the U.S. economy that would be? I mean, every single person in this country would benefit by that. So, I think it's very worthy to work on trying to figure out how to get small business owners just to get out of their own way, pay attention to, doing the fundamentals properly. And that's where flawless launch, by the way, came from. The term flawless launch was used to start a podcast that I did to describe the details of the book that I wrote, so that people didn't necessarily have to go buy the book. A lot of them just give me an overview, let me know what you're thinking. And so I did a 14-part series that did kind of a brief overview of the book, and it was called Flawless Launch, because that's what I want people to do, is create flawless launches for their businesses. And, so that's what Thom and I are working on with the training and with our podcasts and with the book. And Thom's also associated with a peer-to-peer advisory group that Elizabeth and I are part of as well. And that's great for for business owners who have already struggled through the beginning portions and learned what they needed to learn and got to a point where they're starting to succeed, if not being wildly successful. It's just great to still have a pool of people around you who you can rely on to help you, test ideas or solve problems or that kind of thing. So,
yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely. And one of the most satisfying things about our working at Gearhart Law is seeing the clients who are successful, who
Yeah.
really knocked it out of the park, and basically started with nothing, and really built significant companies that employ lots of people. We've had several clients that eventually went public,
Wow.
and so it's really satisfying. In terms of my original goal, it was to help 500 people start new businesses, and now we're over 4,000 clients, and
Wow.
and many have been successful, and some haven't, but they've at least had the experience of trying. And
Right.
a lot of people are very proud of their intellectual property, so it's a positive win-win situation.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
Yeah.
One other thing I just wanted to mention real quickly, we were talking about BNI and the benefits of having an organization like that around you. It's very satisfying to be able to help those people that are in your organization or other like organizations as well, as you mentioned. And I didn't want to leave BNI without telling people what their sort of trademark is, and that is giver's gain. That's what they strongly believe, that you're a member and you're helping others succeed in their businesses. They're going to turn around and help you succeed as well. And so it's a great philosophy to have. I think it's a really strong organization.
Yeah, I love that. And Coach once told me, he said, if you're out in a networking event, the way to introduce yourself after you tell somebody your name is, how can I help you? And
Exactly.
you look for, you look for ways to help the person that you're talking to, and you might know somebody or whatever. And don't even think about talking about yourself until the person asks. But the first thing you should do is approach people and say, how can I help you?
Right.
And that works like magic.
Yeah.
It really is. And
Be
it's
the first to
and it's a great icebreaker too. So,
yeah. Be the first to provide value. That's what I learned.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it served you well, that's for sure.
So that's great. So we're having a marvelous discussion with Thom Stimpel here from Proactive Forms and Flawless Launch. We have to take a commercial break. We'll be back right after this.
Well, welcome back, listeners. You are listening to Passage to Profit with
I hope so.
Richard and Elizabeth Gearhart and our guest, Thom Stimpel. And we are back with Thom. We took a short break. And I have a question I want to ask Thom that actually came from somebody in our audience, which is, Thom, I know a lot of businesses fail. That's what we've been talking about. And you have techniques and advice for helping them succeed. But do you run across the serial entrepreneurs who fail 10 times and finally hit it on number 11?
Yeah, the serial entrepreneurs are an interesting breed. Honestly, most of them are very good at what they do. So the serial entrepreneurs I come across have started numerous businesses, and they really know what they're doing. So they succeed quickly, and then hand them off to somebody in their organization to run for them and go from there. I have a really good friend on the West Coast, Danny Kastner. It seems like Danny starts a business every year. He comes up with all these ideas, and they're really creative. And the only time I ever saw him fail was he was on that TV show that Trump did, The
Apprentice. Yeah.
The Apprentice, right?
Yeah.
And he portrayed himself as a marketing expert, which he pretty much is. But on the show, he decided that he was going to be, the kumbaya guy, get the whole group together so that they could make group decisions, and it backfired on him, and he got fired quickly.
Well, we're glad that didn't stop him.
Yeah, no,
Donald
he's
Trump
still
can't stop everybody.
still going forward, and he's an amazing musician as well. So that's something that Dave will probably be interested in. But there are those entrepreneurs also, those that we call serial entrepreneurs, who start something and fail at it, and then they start something else and fail at it, and start something else and fail at it. But I think the reason that they stay with it is because in each one of those failures, they learn something new. And so they take a slightly different approach, and they do a little bit better and a little bit better and a little bit better, and finally kind of nail it, Mm-hmm. I love speaking with people who are serial entrepreneurs, because most of them, their ideas and their thinking is so broad. It's amazing the stuff they come up with. And so, yeah, if you're a serial entrepreneur and you've tried 4 or 5 things and they keep going down in flames, just learn from your mistakes and buy the book, and then that'll help you.
And call Thom for some coaching too.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that.
I think too, with any venture that you start, you have to use the same principles, because when we started Passage to Profit 4 years ago now, almost, first of all, it was Kenya Gipson's concept, and she held our hand through the whole being on the radio thing, because we had no idea what we were doing. So we had the help that we needed. But we treated it like a new business. So anytime you start any sort of venture, I think you do have to treat it like another business. Otherwise, you just don't give it the attention it needs, right?
Good idea.
Yeah, I think that's correct. And you also mentioned, though, something about the Entrepreneurs Guild, Thom,
Mm-hmm.
During the break. Can you share that with our audience?
Sure. As part of this whole process to gather entrepreneurs, first of all, we started with the podcast, and the podcast was designed to interview successful entrepreneurs that weren't successful right out of the gate. They had things to learn and things to stumble over, and problems to overcome. And so we discuss all those things so that they share that with people who may be having those same problems. And so they get ideas as to how to overcome things. And what we decided we would do is then collect everyone who's been a guest on the podcast, which now is, I don't know, we did the podcast for a couple of years in Boston and restarted it again last year. So it's well over 100 people, 120 or so we've probably done podcasts with. But we decided we'd start this Facebook community, and that we just bring all of them in, so that they would have a place where they could gather to get insight on different ideas, to share ideas in open forum discussions, to ask questions, get answers, share their own expertise, and all that kind of stuff. And then Thom and I would also keep them up to date on podcast guests. We share a lot of information on different topics. We write, white papers or blogs about. We'll also be pretty soon inviting people to some regional events and also to the training as soon as we get it finished. And so, the Entrepreneurs Guild was, it actually was the title of the first organization we tried to build. Actually, the first one we wanted to call the Aspiring Entrepreneurs Guild. But then we learned that all the aspiring entrepreneurs are in hiding. So we needed to find a way to get to them elsewhere. Yeah. So the Entrepreneurs Guild is, it's a complimentary organization. Anybody who's a business owner or wants to be a business owner is welcome to join. It's a Facebook community, and there's a very simple entry criteria.
Well, Thom, thanks so much, because you've been a wonderful guest and shared
Thank you.
lots of really awesome information. How can people find you?
Well, the best way is either through www.flawlesslaunch. That website houses all of our podcasts and some information about the book and some information about the guild. They can also go to my personal website, which is proactiveforums.com. That's a really simple website that just gives an overview of some of the other work that I do for entrepreneurs. They can reach out to me in email, tjs.pbi@outlook.com, or just give me a call, 603-361-1158.
Sounds good. Well, thanks again. I hope you'll stay with us for the rest of the show.
Absolutely.
And maybe continue our discussion with our other presenters.
Right.
So
you're listening to Passage to Profit with Richard and Elizabeth Gearhart, and our guest today, Thom Stimpel. And we will be right back.
okay, great. All right. So now it's time for
Power Move and
Power Move
Fireside.
and Fireside. So we'll wait for Thom to. All right. 3, 2, 1. Welcome back, everybody. It's Passage to Profit with Richard and Elizabeth Gearhart. We're so happy to have you with us. It's now on to Power Move with our media maven, Kenya Gipson. Hi, Kenya.
Hi, Richard and Elizabeth. Thanks for having me.
Oh, so great to see you. So who's up for Power Move tonight?
So I love the conversation we've been having with Thom about serial entrepreneurship, and it only be befitting that we talk about Emma Grade for Power Move tonight. She is a London-born entrepreneur, and they call her the brand whisperer to the Kardashian empire. So she was actually the one that came up with Skims, Kim Kardashian's new clothing line, and Good American, which is Khloe Kardashian's jeanwear line. So she started out with a talent agency where she met Kris Jenner several years ago, got in contact with her, had the idea for Good American, and pitched it to the mom. And that's where all these other brands have been birthed for the Kardashians. So it really kind of wasn't their ideas. They made her a co-founder and a CEO. So I thought that was, a pretty big power move for somebody who was a college dropout and now is worth a few $1 billion as of last year.
That's awesome. That kind of raises the Kardashians in my esteem a little bit, because they didn't just steal her ideas and run away. They brought her into the company. So that was awesome of them to do that. But just shows you networking. Isn't that what we're talking about?
Wow, that's like some power networking, I'll tell you.
And the power of a good idea.
And the power of a good idea. We've had other people on the show who have approached celebrities and managed to get their attention and form a relationship with them and build a business based on that. So if you're that type of person who can do that, then that's obviously a pretty effective way to start a business, I would imagine. So thanks for bringing that up.
Yes.
Elizabeth, it's time for Fireside.
Okay. Well, as Thom said, he is on a peer advisory board with me where I talk about Fireside, and he knows that I have been struggling with my website. And I finally just decided to bite the bullet and have the guy that I picked help me do my website. So he sent a contract over, and I had my attorney, Richard, look at the contract. And Richard had some specific questions. And one of them is like, how much is this actually going to cost? And when I talked to the guy, I had a meeting with him. He was like, well, we have to do discovery. That's $3,000. And then, I gave you a number for the website, but it could go higher. It could be less, but it will never be less. And so maybe we split it out and do the discovery first. And so I think I like the guy and I trust him, but I just can't get him pinned down to what it would actually cost. So I'm going to talk to a couple more people. We did have somebody on the show a while ago. His name is Gene Sower, and he had sold his Samson Media business, but we went back to them for the Gearhart Law website. And so far we're very impressed. So I'm going to talk to him about this, and maybe a couple of the other people I've run across, because it makes me feel a little uneasy thinking I'm going to go in there with like, I don't know, 15 grand and then ending up paying 30.
Right. I mean, that's, but there were other things, and that not just to restrict it to this person, because we've seen this in a lot of contracts, but if you're going to have somebody do a website, you want to make sure you own everything
The
about them.
copyright. Yeah. The
Yeah,
code,
I mean,
everything.
yeah, I mean, to the extent you want to be able to take that website and move it to somebody else if you have a reason to do that. You know, maybe you outgrow the provider, maybe you're not getting enough attention from the provider, but you want to make sure that you own everything. And a lot of website contracts are written in a way where the original the company that makes the website owns part of it or some parts of it, and they'll use language in the contract that says, you know, you'll own this part of the content, but then we own the back end. And so you want to be very careful that you're aware of that. And it may be that you agree to it, but it's definitely a sticking point. And then the other part is that you want to make sure that there are some deadlines for performance in the contract, so that you know, the process doesn't get dragged out indefinitely. If they suddenly land IBM as a client, your work may get pushed to the back of the line. So you want to make sure that there are specific dates that they have to live up to, and you don't want to be unreasonable, but you want to make sure that you have those as part of your deal with them.
And this is something that we learned the hard way.
And several of our clients come to us and they say, what can we do? And we say, well, you know,
so the contracts are really important. And so I'm negotiating with Andrew on this, but I am going to look at a couple other people. I do think it's extremely important to me to own everything that with this, and I am paying them, so I don't see why they would want to keep part of it.
Well, the
I mean,
reason
I do
why,
see why, but
yeah, I mean, the reason why is they want to be able to take that back end that they've built and sell it to somebody else, right? And a lot of software companies have that as a business model, and that, from their point of view, that's understandable, but that doesn't necessarily help you. So
right. So that's where I am.
Okay.
So Thom, I look like Thom wanted to say something. Did you have a comment, Thom?
No, I just was thinking, you know, if people educate themselves about what is going to be involved in the process, and then put together a proposal of their own to hand it to a contractor like that and say, this is the way I want things done, and I want you to respond to this proposal accordingly, then you can include things like, I'm going to own all of it, 100% of it. You don't own any of the back end. Yeah, you wrote the code. Congratulations. That's what you do for a living. That's what you get paid for. But I own it because it's my company and it's my idea, and so on and so forth. And there's other things that you'd want to put in there. And definitely, you know, as Richard said, you've got to have a timeline in there. You've got to have a clause in there that says, if you don't perform, you know, here's what's going to happen. And there are other aspects there, but educate yourself and approach someone on that basis, not just, hey, I got a website I need built. What do you think? You know,
that's excellent advice. And what I'm going to do is take what I've done with this person and do just what Thom said to do, because he knows what he's talking about, and so does Richard. So
yeah, I know. I think that's a great idea, Thom, and great advice.
I have another suggestion too, is because I went through the same process with my own Combs Music website. And there are experts out there that once you get the basic website design, there are other people who are really, really good at what I would call an audit of your website. They're impartial, going to take a look at it and say, here's how it works really well. Here's what needs improving. And with the short attention spans of people these days, here's what you need to do to make sure you grab your audience just like that, instead of making them scroll down the page 3 pages before they get to something. So I would say find you a good auditor or expert in evaluating your website, and it's worth paying a few $100s to somebody to take a look at your website and give you their recommendations for improvement and efficiency.
Yeah, that's a good point. I forgot to mention what Fireside actually is. So that business,
that would help.
Yeah.
I do it every time. It's a video directory of small businesses. And I have a certain format and a certain architecture that doesn't exist anywhere else yet. Well, it exists for me. And I have a website now, but it was a square peg in a round hole because I took anyways, I don't want to get into the details, but I took something that existed and tried to fit mine to it, but mine needs to be different. So that's where the search is. So yeah, for the design part, I think I can do that. I need the heavy duty programming on the back end. So, but yeah, that was a good point. Thanks, Dave. So are we ready to move on?
I think we're ready to move on.
This is awesome. I'm wearing my entrepreneur hat and getting all sorts of advice that I need. So
But before we do that, we're going to take a commercial break. So we'll be right back after this.
Okay. Welcome back, listeners. You are listening to Passage to Profit with Richard and Elizabeth Gearhart and our special guest, Thom Stimpel. And now we are on to our presenter, Shereese Floyd, who has Witness My Life. This is an incredible platform, and it's really helping a lot of people. And I can hardly wait to hear about it. Shereese, welcome.
I thank you. I appreciate being here today.
So tell us what you're doing with your platform, because I think it's amazing.
Yeah, so I am a storyteller and a brand strategist. And my company, Witness My Life, is a communications firm that really helps people tell their stories. In essence, what I really do is help people raise their voices and tell their stories so that they are impossible to ignore. And in the world of entrepreneurship, it is very important for people to be able to tell their stories. As Thom mentioned, this idea that 97% of businesses fail, they fail because they are forgettable. And telling your story is one of the ways that you can prevent that.
Right. And here in my notes, it says that you have a real big vision for this, right? That you want to bring the whole world together and to provide opportunities for people to see, SEE. Can you talk about that a little?
Yeah, so I'm definitely a Kumbaya girl. So I do believe to my core that our stories are the one way that truly bring the world together. I did a TEDx on this about 2 years ago that was called The Secret to Healing the World. I believe that when we share our stories, there is commonality there. My story connects to your story and connects to your story. And it's one huge story with all of these differences, but it's more similar than it is apart. And so it's this idea that we see each other, that we support, we educate, and then we encourage each other through our stories and through building businesses that allow us to be able to share those values and ideals.
That sounds great. So what's your story?
Well, I came into this process. Actually, I had a very personal story, as we all do. I actually, at the time, I was living a lie, so to speak. And I will tell you, how it all came about. I was sitting 2008 watching the women's Olympic the women's 4x4 relay. And the woman dropped the baton on the last leg. And it's my favorite event of the Olympics. And I started to cry. And I thought, this is more than just about her dropping the baton. What is this thing? She drops the baton and she picks it up and she kept going. And I was crying and I remember thinking, why don't I have that thing that makes you pick up the baton and keep going? I felt like I was the baton, not the woman who was actually picking up the baton. And I was very invisible in my life at that time. I was married to someone who was incarcerated, and the people around me had no idea that this was going on. And I was showing up in my life every day, being unseen and unheard, just going through the motions. And during that time, I thought, I'm hiding in plain sight. And so I started to tell the story. And people started to come around me who also was in the similar situation, who were also hiding in plain sight. And we started building community around that. And so what you see now with Witness My Life is just the evolution of that. I'm still helping people tell their stories. It's just now a little bit more business focused, and it's personal in the way of helping people build their thought leadership.
Wow. Kenya, do you have any thoughts or questions?
Well, I like that the whole hiding in plain sight, because I feel we all do that in some way, shape, or form. I kind of feel like I'm in that phase right now. Actually. And that's actually a good title for a book. I don't know if you're doing a book, but I just was curious to see, like, you know, once you made that realization of you wanted to be that person that was carrying the baton and not the baton, like what were some steps that you took?
The first thing I did was started to ask people around me, what is it that you see in me that I don't see in myself? Because people have a vision of you when you're too close to your own story, when you are, you know, reliving or telling yourselves these negative stories. The people around you can see you in a much fuller way than you can see yourself. And so, for example, being in that situation, I was like, I'm so embarrassed to be in this situation. How stupid am I for being in this situation? Those are negative thoughts. But the people outside were saying, you're very courageous, you're resilient, you have a strong will about you. Two different things, one positive, one negative. So the first thing I did was to ask the people around me, what is it that you see? And then started to reframe the stories that I was telling myself, because what you believe about yourself are the actions that you are going to take. And then started to go through my life. Well, what are the ways that I do show up courageous? What have been the ways that I have shown resiliency? Rewriting the stories in my own life and then coming full circle to believe those things.
You know, that's so amazing. And I can really relate to that story, you know, because I tend to be very self-critical.
Yes.
And I do, and I
He
take
does.
responsibility for things that are really not have nothing to do with me, but I still feel responsible for them. And it's a tough journey to talk back, you know, to the critical self, because it can be a very powerful voice, and it really takes a lot of effort to do that. And you know, my fear was always that I had all of these blind spots, that there were things that were wrong with me that other people saw, but they weren't telling me about, right? And so
Until you got married to me.
well, that's true. I
You know
can't
every single one.
I can't deny that in a minute, but it is true what you're saying. And a lot of us, to one extent or another, you know, have to deal with these situations. And I love the fact that you're you know, talking about this,
And
because
bringing the
it's
stories out.
and
yeah.
bringing the stories
But
out.
I see Thom has a comment.
Yeah, I mean, I just love the whole concept of what you've done. Storytelling is so powerful in so many ways, and you know, it's even in business on a day-to-day basis. It's better to be telling stories about what people can accomplish rather than telling them what to do to go accomplish, because they relate to stories. It's they don't care about details. The similarity and the connections that you discussed is what gets people connected, and it's what gives people confidence to move forward in a positive direction. I think of my career prior to starting this business, and there were 3 specific times when somebody said something to me that was really encouraging. It was something they were commenting about something that I had done or had the capability of doing that I didn't know I had. And the fact that someone, you know, portrayed that, told me that story, really gave me some confidence. And in every case, it kind of boosted my career along a little bit further. So, yeah, pulling people's stories out, it's a phenomenal thing to do. I congratulate you on all you've accomplished. It's a great direction.
Yeah, Shereese, I have a question for you. So I'm looking at kind of what your mission is with this, and you're trying to pull people that are marginalized by society into what you're doing and help them become seen and tell their stories. How are you doing that?
Well, if you think about human beings, we all have this basic core need, which is to be seen and to be heard and to be valued. And when we think about the things that have happened in history, when people are behaving badly, at the core of that is because they do not feel seen, heard, and valued. When people are rioting in the streets, when people are acting out in any kind of way, it goes back to that. And so when I work with people, we start with understanding that we, in our life, in our being, we're the only one on the planet that can do what we do in the way that we do it. We are unique unto ourselves. So even if there are people that sell a similar product that you sell, no one can sell it and be you, because you are really the real product. It's not the commodity. It's you are really the real product. And so what I do is to help people tap into the power of one. You are the hero of your own life. And when you realize how powerful that is, and that no one else can knock you off of that pedestal, you start to see people realize that what they bring to the table is the only thing that they can bring to the table. And then they show up in that full power, and then they live through that lens. So it's really just a matter of walking people through their life's journey and connecting, as Thom talked about, their why, if they are in business, or even if they're not in business, connecting their why to what they are doing. I like to say, if your why doesn't make you cry, it's not big enough. And just wanting to make more money is not a big enough why. Because again, people do not buy what you do. They buy why you do it. They buy how you make them feel. And they buy the story that you tell them about themselves, whether or not you are in business. And to tap into that personal brand that we all have, whether or not you are in business.
That's great. And how has your life changed as you've evolved through this journey and this understanding? I can't imagine that you're not more fulfilled now than you were when you first started.
Absolutely. You know, I have always had a superpower that I thought, that I looked at like it wasn't. I've always been very emotional. I've always had a flair for the dramatic, as you can tell.
I love the way you look. When I said that, you're so put together. You look awesome. I need to work on myself a little.
Thank you. And I've always been in tune to people. I've always cared about how people feel. And I used to look at that as a negative, but that is my superpower. That is what makes me good at what I do. And so I want to leave the audience, the people who are listening here, when you are talking about, because right now we have this thing where people are quitting their jobs. We have people who are coming into entrepreneurship by necessity, not because they necessarily thought of themselves as an entrepreneur, but they don't want to be at the job that they've been at. So they're gonna do whatever it is to make money. I want to leave you with these 3 questions because they helped me get grounded in who I am and what I do. So when you think about aligning yourself to your money, your purpose, and your paycheck is what I like to call it. I want you to think about, what is an experience that you have had that you do not want anyone else to have? That will help you ground your why, and that will help you ground your purpose and show up in the world in yourself. What do you want to be known for? That will help you determine the things that you want to do, like this interview right here. I want to be known for helping people tell their story. So you show up in places where you want to be known for. And then the last question is, what does the world lose if we do not know your story? Because again, you are the only person that has the experience that you have. And in those 3 questions, keep those focused. Whatever you do to attempt to make money, you will always be grounded in your purpose, and that paycheck will follow that.
Wow.
Do you have a book? Or, I mean, like, where can people go to find this? If they couldn't write it down fast enough, like, where can people go to find out more?
Well, I do. It's not a book. It's a storytelling journal. It's not like a book telling you what to do. It just helps you get your story out of your head. It's called Become the Greatest Story Ever Told. You can find that on my website at witnessmylife.org. And you can also find me on LinkedIn under my name, Shereese Floyd, and there are videos of me all around on either one.
That was so profound.
That was amazing.
Because I've always heard the second one, like, why are you doing this? But the other two questions that you asked, I've never really thought about those before. And now you're making me think, I really need to think about these things with my business and with everything I do.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So,
yeah.
Well, Shereese, you've been just absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for joining us on Passage to Profit. And I really feel like you're bringing things to a whole new level in the world. And we wish you a lot of success. Right now, we're moving on to Dave Combs, right?
So thank you, listeners, for listening to Passage to Profit with Richard and Elizabeth Gearhart. And we don't go away, because we still have another incredible presenter. And what's really cool for me is, like, I don't know about these people before the show. That's one of the most rewarding things for me about doing this show, is I meet these people that just have amazing stories and businesses. And Shereese, that was incredible what we just went through with you. And Dave Combs coming up is got something really incredible too. So don't go away. We'll be right back. Well, welcome back, listeners, to Passage to Profit with Richard and Elizabeth Gearhart and our special guest, Thom Stimpel. And now we were on to our next presenter, Dave Combs with Combs Music. If you have not heard Dave's music, well, go to his website right now and listen. But first, hear what he has to say. So welcome, Dave. Tell us about your music and your journey.
Well, thank you, Elizabeth and Richard, for inviting me on your program today. This has been very stimulating. And as an entrepreneur, we all like to hear stories, and we all learn something every time we get together with another entrepreneur. It never fails, and this is no exception. And I probably have a few years on, I believe, everybody in the audience here today. I'll be turning 75 years old in about 2 weeks. But I've been working at one way or another since 1965. What's that, 57 years since I graduated from high school? That's a long time. But I've had an incredible life of a great education. I was a math major, a physics minor. I programmed computers. I learned how to do that. I worked in the computer center in college, got my first job, my only corporate job, with Western Electric, which later became AT&T. So I worked in the technology industry and telecommunications industry for 22 and a half years before I was finally able to quit my job and do my entrepreneur job full time. But in that journey is so full of those stories of lessons learned. And I counted up, my book that's right here called Touched by the Music is full of, and I counted them up yesterday, there are 78 little short stories in the book. If you capsulize my journey along life into 78 little short stories, and that's not the entire picture, of course. There's a lot of stories that didn't make it into the book, but it's an entrepreneur's...
The ones you couldn't tell publicly, right?
Well, yeah, some of those I wouldn't want to tell publicly, right? Yeah, but anyway, I hopefully put the most interesting ones in the book, and
those are probably some of the ones you left out, but anyway.
Yeah. So I did take my whole life's journey with my career, but I'm mainly about my musical journey since 1981 with Rachel's Song, the writing of Rachel's Song, my first song. And that the journey from that one song to eventually writing over 120 songs and recording over 170 songs, and with 15 albums of music. And so that's quite a journey from one little small beginning and a product to eventually a full fledgling business that was very successful. And
so Rachel's Song, so just to talk about that a little bit, I mean, that's a song a lot of people would recognize. I mean, it's been out there a lot for a long time, but there aren't any words. It's instrumental, right? And so
it's all yeah.
And so can you sing a little bit for us, or?
But your description is soft, soothing, and relaxing instrumental music. And you joked earlier that it would put people to sleep, but it really is supposed to put people to sleep in some ways, right?
Some people who have a problem going to sleep, and in fact, I've gotten letters from people who were alcoholics, recovering from alcoholism. Apparently, one of the side effects of alcoholism is you have trouble going to sleep. And so one of my fan letters I got many years ago was from a fan that said that when she got my Rachel Song album, she said she was able to sleep through the night for the first time in years. So,
Wow.
and she attributes that music of helping her maintain her sobriety and
Elizabeth, you need to listen to this song because she's like, lately she has not been sleeping.
I don't know if it's the cats or
Well,
if it's
we
something
have
else
cats
about
that
it.
are like noisy in the middle of
But
the night.
I do want something that I can play all night long to sleep to. So do you have this on YouTube or Pandora?
yes,
or
I have I have several of my songs on a long playing YouTube video, and I created these ironically for the pandemic to be played in nursing homes and assisted living facilities, so that they could just push play on the YouTube video and it would play for 6 or 7 hours. They didn't have to tend to it; it would just play. So yes, you can go to my Combs Music YouTube channel, and there are, I think, 3 long playing YouTube music videos that will play this soft, soothing music. It'll play at 6, 7 hours, so you can put it on when you go to bed, and it'll still be playing 7 hours later. So
Well,
I'm doing that tonight.
Yeah, I think you should, because everyone needs a good night's rest. And if with any luck, our producer Noah will, and with your permission, Dave, we'll be playing Rachel's song and maybe some other soundtracks softly in the background as this
that'd be great.
progresses. Yeah.
So all these stories that I accumulated together, and during the pandemic is when I wrote my book. You know, all of us were searching for, what are we going to do? We're at home, we can't go anywhere, can't do anything else. What are we going to do? So my wife says, well, why don't you write down all these stories and put them in a book? So I did. I wrote down all the stories, and in the process, I met and have become friends with somebody you all know, and that's Jack Canfield. He is the author of the Chicken Soup for the Soul book. And I sent as a friend, he helped mentor me a little bit with how to put the book together, and he read the book, and like you said, I believe it was Tom, you said a while ago, when somebody told you something that really meant something in your life. Well, Jack Canfield told me, he said, Dave Combs, you're a good writer. Well, I'm not sure anybody of that caliber and stature had ever told me, Dave, you're a good writer. Now, I write music as well, but writing a book is a whole different animal. So I wrote my book, and lo and behold, guess who wrote the foreword to my book? Jack Canfield.
Wow. So I want to ask Thom Stimpel if he has any comments here.
Yeah.
You guys have something in common, right?
Well, yeah, writing a book is it's a major undertaking. I wrote mine also during the pandemic because there was a couple of months I couldn't travel.
Yeah.
So I couldn't work, so I decided it was a good time to sit down and put all this stuff on paper. Of course, mine's a business book, strictly a business book, but I do have another book in the works that's more of my life story, because when people get to know me and get to hear all the crazy stuff I've done in my life, including running away from home when I was 15 and moving to Hawaii to be allegedly the best surfer on earth. Not.
But did you at least learn to surf? That's
Oh yeah, I learned to surf when I was 11, so that was in the cards already. But yeah, so everybody who knows me says, "Oh man, you got to write a book." So I have started that. So Dave, you can appreciate how
Absolutely,
how
yes.
you need to pull all those strings to pull it all together.
But I will say though, getting back to Shereese's interview, I mean, writing those stories, people learn a lot by reading other people's stories. It's not, it's not just about getting your story out there. It's about, well, how are people going to connect? What things happened? What did you do? How did you handle this crisis? All of those things are why biographies are popular, right? And you want to know what other people have done. And
I want Kenya to pitch in here too.
Yeah.
Kenya, do you have
Well, I don't have anything profound. I was to say, I don't have anything profound to ask. I really just appreciate what you're doing with music. I think it's always been a very therapeutic thing for me, especially like growing up as a kid and just kind of even in my adulthood. Like I use a lot of music with the movement stuff that I do. But I guess if I had the opportunity to ask you anything, could you foresee all this, like where you are with the book and what you were going to be doing with music and helping people this way?
I would like to be able to tell you I did, but really I didn't. This is one of those things where circumstances and things cross your path and opportunities appear that in hindsight, they were no accident. They were divinely inspired, or as Squire Rushnell says in his little book, When God Winks, these were God winks. Somebody higher than me put somebody in my path, and we just happened to meet. People like the Jack Canfield and the musician Gary Prim that I met in Nashville, Tennessee, that have become, we're like brothers now. We've known just the best of friends, and he's a wonderful musician. And those kind of things just don't happen by accident. So no, I didn't see the whole long range picture, but I do have, I'm a math major, physics minor. I have my MBA from Wake Forest University. So I am a business person, and I've always looked for opportunities to better myself and to try entrepreneur. I have some failure entrepreneur adventures that I could talk about too, but we're not going to go into those today. But the music that came along started with that one song, Rachel's song. And it was one of those inspirational things that just happened. And once it landed on earth through me, then I played it for people. It got its name, Rachel's Song, when I played it at our godchild Rachel's christening service, named it after her. I played it during the service for her. And then it got recorded 3 years later in Nashville with Gary Prim, the artist that I use. It got played on the radio. People loved what they heard on the radio, started calling radio stations. I got it played on every easy listening radio station in the United States. There were about 400 of them back then in the late 80s. And I started getting fan mail. People started writing me these wonderful stories about how my music had touched their life. There was a lady who had just had finished her training as an emergency medical technician, driving home from her last class. And on their way home, she and her husband, they saw an old man fall down on the sidewalk in her neighborhood. Stopped the car. She got out, ran over to the gentleman to see if she could help him. And on the car radio was some music playing. And so the car door was still open. She yelled back to her husband, "Turn that music up." And he did. And the music helped calm the gentleman down, and he eventually was okay, whether he was having a panic attack or a heart attack or whatever it was. And so the music had simply helped calm him down. They got back home, tracked down the radio station and called and said, "What was that song that was playing at 6:07 p.m. tonight on the radio?" And the announcer didn't even miss a beat. He says, "Oh, that was Rachel's song." Because apparently she wasn't the only one that ever called about that song. But so she wrote me this wonderful letter about how my music, she tracked me down and wrote me this wonderful letter of that story. So those stories are so important, and I have heard from over 50,000 people over the past 40 years about my music. Now, you stack up 50,000 letters and notes, that's a basement full of boxes of letters. Yeah. And I put about 22 pages in my book of those letters. Chapter 21 is a bunch of those special notes and letters. But the journey, as Jack Canfield said on the back of my book, he says, it's a great story in addition to the wonderful music he's created. His book is almost a primer in what to do if you want to get something out into the world. So these stories tell how I got my music out into the world and didn't just keep it to myself.
So I'm sorry. So what is your overall vision for your music? Is it to have everybody in the world listen to it and calm down? Because that would be great.
Well, the one word that is most frequently used in all those 50,000 letters that I've got is the word peace. And if you stop and think about it, when you have peace and all of its many meanings, but if you and yourself are at peace, that means you're probably calmed down, you're in a good place, and things are okay. And so I think that my mission is to spread my music throughout as much of the world as I can. And thanks to the internet, we can do that these days. Mm-hmm. But to spread peace and happiness and calm and healing around the world through my music. And that's really I wrote my book to tell my story, but to tell my story so that people would also go and be blessed and touched by the music themselves.
Do you ever have performances of it? anywhere?
I am not a performer per se. I did do it one time. A radio station in St. Louis, Missouri ran a contest of all their listeners is, what's your most popular song and artist that you like to listen to? And they ran the contest, and they were going to invite the 5 top artists that the listeners voted for to come to St. Louis to do a concert. I got a phone call from the program director at this KEZK radio station, and he says, Dave, he told me about the contest. He said, you're one of our 5 winners. I said, really? He said, yeah, people love Rachel's song. And I said, well, who are the other 4? And he said, well, it's probably some people you may have heard of. It's the Letterman, the Association, Don McLean, and George Benson. I said, whoa, man, me. I thought, man, I have landed in the right place here. So yes, I did go, and it was an outdoor free concert in St. Louis at Booter Park. It's a great big park, outdoor venue. 26,000 people showed up, and I got to play Rachel's song on a concert grand piano on the stage for 26,000 people. And right behind me, then the next act was the Letterman. And I spent all day that afternoon signing autographs right beside the Letterman were at a table right beside me. Became really good friends, even to this day, with the Letterman. They're wonderful people, and I enjoy seeing them every time I get a chance to see them.
What an amazing story.
Yeah.
Like this
Who
really
would have
does,
thought?
No wonder you wrote a book.
this really does seem like divine inspiration to me. Right? You hear divine inspiration. Well, this is what it looks like.
Yeah.
So I think that we have to wrap up this segment, but what's the best way for people to find your music?
Well, we were talking about websites a while ago, and my website I've deliberately designed to be very simple, and it's a landing page that when you see there, you'll see my book on the left side, and you'll see my CD on the right side of the page, and underneath them will be little things you can click on that will take you to Amazon to buy the book, or it'll take you to Amazon to buy the CD. And you can either buy a CD, buy a download of the music, or you can stream it. And likewise with the book, you can either get a paperback copy, or you can get a Kindle ebook, or you can buy an Audible and listen to me read it to you for 8 hours. And in the middle of the page, you'll see a link that says Play Rachel's Song. And it's the real thing. It's not a watered down version or anything. It is the original recording of Rachel's song that I made in August of 1986.
Excellent. So would you consider your book to be uplifting? Is that how you would describe it?
It is inspiring, uplifting, and hopefully one that will be a go-to book for people to just sit down and read when they just want to read a feel-good story and be inspired.
I better get my copy of it. So if you go to Dave's website, it's Combs, like combing your hair, COMBS, right? Music.com, combsmusic.com. So
that'll do it. That will.
Excellent. So
and I love to hear from you. If you want to write me an email, I'm like Tom, you'll send me an email too. I'm at dave@combsmusic.com. Just let me know what you think about it. Let me know what you think about our podcast today. I'd like to hear that too.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Dave. So you are listening to Passage to Profit with Richard and Elizabeth Gearhart. Our special guest today is Thom Stimpel. We still have a little bit of wrap up to do. I'll tell you everybody's websites where you can find out more about the people that we had on the show today.
Yes. And if you're only tuning in now, you've missed an incredible show, but you can hear it tomorrow on our podcast, wherever you get our podcast. So check it out. I think it's been a wonderful show so far. So
I feel very spiritually uplifted after listening to the people on the show today.
You're kind of floating a little bit above your chair.
So anyway, we will be right back.
And welcome back, everyone, to Passage to Profit. What an amazing show. We have such amazing guests, and I can't express how much I've really enjoyed being here.
This has really been a great show. So we had to start Thom Stimpel, who is an entrepreneur coach. There's a lot of business coaches, but Thom is really an entrepreneur coach, and he has a book, The Entrepreneurial Mindset, and he gave me an incredible piece of advice on the show today. So, really, he's an excellent resource for budding entrepreneurs and people that are growing.
Yeah. And, you really get his why. and his why is really to help you. And I think that is the most powerful why that a person can have.
So you can find him at proactiveforums.com. That's one of his websites. His other website is flawlesslaunch.com. And please look him up if you're thinking about starting a business or stuck with the business you have now. He's a great resource. And then we had Shereese Floyd with Witness My Life. Oh my gosh. You know, I had not spoken to Shereese or Dave before the show, and I was just so impressed with what Shereese is doing.
I was just absolutely blown away. And you think of so many people who feel unnoticed and, you know, and perhaps unworthy too. And Shereese is doing marvelous work to kind of lift everybody up together.
Right. And her vision is a wonderful world. Everybody here, like their whole vision is a wonderful world where people are acknowledged, seen, can tell their stories, and are just uplifted. And so her website is witnessmylife.org. So Shereese Floyd. And then we had Dave Combs with Combs Music, comb like you comb your hair, COMBS music.com. And it's just this beautiful, wonderful, relaxing instrumental music that you can sleep to and that calms people down. And he's written a book of all of his journey with developing this music called Touched by the Music. And he also has a song. If you go to his website, Rachel's song was his first song. And you may have actually heard it.
Yeah. And I mean, and Dave's a hoot. Let's just put it out there. He's a fun guy. He's a funny guy to listen to. And it was real delight having him on his show. So unfortunately, it's time to wrap things up. But please stay tuned for another Passage to Profit coming up next week, where we have more wonderful and insightful guests. And don't forget, before we go, I'm going to start that again.
Right. Final comments, right?
Right. So so before we go, I'd like to ask our guru in the room, Thom Stimpel, about final words for our audience.
Well, this has been an incredible show, and the work that Shereese is doing to me it's just fascinating, and it's a great story about how someone has come across something that they could really inspire people with, and that they could really succeed at themselves, and just following it through to its fruition. And I'm really impressed with what you're doing. So congratulations there. And Dave, as a frustrated musician, I really appreciate what it is that you've accomplished, and I plan on buying that book because I need to read some good stories. So
that's great. Kenya, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, this whole show was very interconnected, right? I loved what Thom was talking about with finding your why, and how Shereese is helping people pick up the baton and keep going. And then Dave, how he's, helping people tap into that divine timing in life and find peace, right? So I think you need all three of those components to be not only a successful entrepreneur, but a successful human being. So thought it was a really, really great conversation.
Thank you so much for that, Kenya. As usual, you're the cherry on the top of the whipped cream. So. But before we go, I'd like to thank Noah Fleischman, our producer, who has carried the ball down the field and scored many touchdowns, and Alicia Morrissey, who, without her help, this obviously couldn't happen, and Mark Wilson for getting us into the syndication game. So please tune in again next week for another episode of Passage to Profit on this station, and we look forward to seeing you then. And don't forget to like us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
This is Richard and Elizabeth Gearhart signing off.